Is this Matt?
It sure is.
Hi, Matt. It's Margaret Trudeau speaking.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you out in Edmonton?
I'm doing well, waiting for your arrival.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, let's start with I guess 2 weeks from now, June 22nd, Festival Place, International Women's Day, rescheduled for March.
I know.
It's okay.
They were so kind.
yeah, of course. So you're giving a talk and a book signing. I guess let's start with the talk. Changing My Mind's the new book. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, what I'm talking about, and I've been talking for about 4 years, crisscrossing the country my audience usually is women and people in the mental health care community and people who are suffering from mental disorders and families who are concerned about members who are. And what my message is that what we have to look at is brain health, our brain health. We have to protect our brains from very young from brain injury because that can lead to dysfunction of the brain and cause problems later on. And we have to live properly to nourish our healthy brains. When you have bipolar, which I have, it is an unbalance of the chemicals, the hormones in my brain, and that can be corrected with pharmaceuticals. They can adjust the chemical imbalance, and then I can live a healthy, happy life. So there is help out there, and we have to look at mental health in a different way. We have to look at it, start the conversation, stop being ashamed of having a mental disorder, and just consider it something that we have to deal with as we would deal with our physical health in every other way.
It seems to be something that's more prevalent in society. I know there's a songwriter out of Vancouver, Matthew Good, who made a record about being bipolar a couple of years ago, too. It seems to be more in the consciousness of people than I think it ever was.
I think what bipolar is an exaggeration of our emotions. We go from very high in mania, which unfortunately can progress into psychosis, and that's where it becomes a severe mental illness. The mania is a disorder. It's a very highly excited time, a cycle in a bipolar disorder where you are irresponsible, you're lacking judgment, you are acting on impulse, and that's a dangerous state. And the other state is depression, and sadness is part of life. We will all confront sadness and tragedy in our life, unfortunately, because that's what life is. But if you have bipolar, your sadness will go down into depression, and depression is a disease. It's a terrible thief. It steals you of your delight and joy and interest in life. So by dealing with the depression and by dealing with the mania, which is what I have to deal with, I'm able to live a normal emotional range. And that's all we ask from the medical community, is to allow us to have a normal range of emotions, not extreme, not exaggerated, not emotions that get us into endless trouble.
You had said something in there earlier about brain injury. What did you mean by that? How do we?
Well, I think that
like bike helmets,
showing
like
that one of the things that can trigger brain dysfunction in the wiring of it, in the cycling, in the hormone distribution can be early brain injury. So you have to be careful of your children. Put them on helmets when they ride their bikes. When they ski. When they be always conscious of not hurting that most important organ in our body, the brain. And if we look at our mental health as our brain health, it somehow is an easier, more rational approach, less stigmatized, less shameful. You know, why would we assume we all have perfect brains? We all don't have perfect bodies.
That's for sure. Have you the brain injury thing and helmets got me thinking about the NHL right now, and they have a whole headshots thing where they're trying to avoid people getting hit. Have you spoken to them at all about that?
The collateral damage that comes from repeated concussion in terms of the person who's suffering it and the people who have to live with the person who then becomes disabled mentally by the trauma to the brain. So it's just essential that we guard our children so that they can have a high-functioning, happy, delightful life, that they'll be able to cope with tragedy and rejection, frustration, all the things. And this is all that we want, is people to have a healthy brain, a healthy grasp of reality, a healthy expectation of themselves. You know, there's a lot of things that are involved in being a healthy person, and it's not just keeping your body fit.
I'm going to kind of change topics, but not really, because I think I read somewhere that maybe smoking marijuana triggered some of the bipolar disorder. I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
It doesn't. Marijuana, actually, there is a concern about marijuana with bipolar because it can have the propensity, not causal, but it can be one of the triggers that will trigger you up into mania, because often you'll use marijuana or you'll use alcohol or you'll use another kind of addiction to ease your own pain, to self-medicate, to try and improve the way you feel. And marijuana certainly lifts you out of depression, so that tackles one part of it, but perhaps it can also push you too much into mania, and that's a very dangerous state, because you're very irresponsible. You behave like a teenager, even though you may be an adult with adult responsibilities.
Right. I think a lot of people, at least my age, think it's kind of cool for you I assume you smoked in 24 Sussex back in the day?
No, I really didn't, because those were the days when every 2 years I delivered a healthy baby.
Right, fair enough, sorry.
I really wasn't.
So those rumors are false.
I was a very happy person then until I was hit by postpartum depression. Right. And marijuana wasn't the thing that I used to try and get out of it. But there have been times in my life, there's no question, when I found the pain that I was living in physically and emotionally just too much, and would reach for something. And for me, being a flower child of the 60s and not being terribly fond of the effects of alcohol, found that marijuana was the thing that made me feel better. Even though it was illegal, even though I was told that it was not the thing to do, it seemed to somehow make me feel better. But then it becomes an addiction, and then it becomes a dependency, more a dependency than addiction, but it becomes part of the problem, not part of the solution. And it's when we self-medicate, we're not allowing the people who have all the expertise in the workings of the brain, the scientists, the psychiatrists, the researchers, we're not allowing them to help us properly medicate and balance our emotions and lift us out of sadness, instead of using alcohol or drugs or gambling or shopping or sex or whatever addictions we will escape through, and not having to face head on our own reality. And there is help out there. That's the good news.
Yeah, there's certainly, well, in your book is certainly a start for all that help, too.
Well, I hope it kicks off. I think it has kicked off the conversation into our mental health, our brain health, how our emotions control us, how our hormones control us as women. It's a whole huge area. It's kind of the last taboo. It's the last area that we really have to examine closely in our society, our mental health. It's so important, and it has such collateral damage. It's one thing just to let a person keep suffering in the cycle of madness and despair without any relief, but that will ripple out into the family, into the children, into the marriage, into the workplace. So it's something that it really has to be nipped in the bud.
You had mentioned the 60s and going out and finding ways to get away from everything. And I wonder if you could share a story about Studio 54 or Mick Jagger or Jack Nicholson.
What an escape that was.
Well,
oh my goodness,
I know. It might be a bit of a departure, but...
New York I've always considered New York City as sort of the battlefront of the world. I mean, it's where all the new ideas, all the new fashion, all the new, the brightness gathers. And Studio 54 was a place that just in the right time, the right place, when disco was hot, when people were starting to really network and get together. And Studio 54 was an awful lot of fun. And I love dancing. I danced and danced, but I also met extraordinary people there as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Fun. I have no regrets about Studio 54.
I'm sure you don't. I wish I was there at that time.
And you'll laugh at this, oddly enough, my home that I live in now, a beautiful old condo in Montreal, downtown Montreal, its number is number 54. Oh. The children call it Studio 54 nice. North.
That's fantastic.
Although there's no disco ball, just little play kitchens and wagons and books for children.
Of course. And I'm sure toys littered everywhere.
No, Grandma's my best role. Yeah.
Is music important in your life?
Yes, it always has been. It feeds my soul.
What song is the most meaning for you, that has helped you through the most?
Well, there's been so many, but I have to say both the Stones and the Beatles, because they were I was so impressionable in my 20s, late teens and 20s. But I like Bono a lot too. I like his anthem One, and I love Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. It lifts my spirits, even though it's a sad, tragic song about love. There's a lot of music out there. I love jazz. I love classical music. I'm a great buff of all the classics, because I find in music that's where the joy lives, in the pauses between the beats.
You mentioned a few things in there I want to touch on. One, I guess we'll start from Bono and move to Africa, because Bono makes me think of Africa, and Watercan, if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, Watercan, I've been with Watercan now for about 17 years, and it's an NGO, one that started very small out of Ottawa, but now we're getting bigger and bigger, and it's wonderful. I'm the honorary chairman of Watercan. What we do essentially, Matt, is we put in clean water where there's filthy water that is killing the children in small villages in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania is where we're working now. And it's extraordinary the difference that the clean water makes. We know it's the gift of life, but for people who haven't got it, for mothers who have no choice but to give their babies, their children, a filthy water that is only going to take their lives, if not impair them, for the rest of their lives and their development. So the water is the gift, and I've been very lucky to be with this wonderful Canadian NGO, because it's mean and lean and thoughtful and mindful, and I love being part of it and making a difference and being able to realize how blessed we are as Canadians. I think we have to take one step forward and allow ourselves to be generous and help those who can't help themselves in other parts of the world. It just seems a good thing to do.
How close are we to sustaining clean water for everyone in Africa? Is it even relatively near?
Not a drop in the bucket.
No.
But it's a beginning. Every single charity that works in Africa, every single group. I like Bono's idea that it's not charity, it's just justice. But every group that works over there puts water as its first thing that it does, is cleans up the water. Because without clean water, you can't even start the work of education or growing or agriculture or anything, because the drudgery is so great for the women when they don't have access to clean water. And sanitation goes hand in hand. We do the both together.
You're saying things that makes me think of a quote that Justin said. I think in the fall I read it in the Star. It was something about you are way, way smarter than Pierre. Do you know what quote I'm talking about?
But I think that may be like street smart, because Pierre, there's no question, his mind, his intellect was just extraordinary. But I have trod a little different path than Pierre in my life, and I've seen an awful lot, and I've been committed to things that I think that he inspired me to get involved in, particularly in the water. And my work with mental health has brought me on another level of understanding how much suffering there is going on in Canadian families because of the mental health issue. And I'm so glad that I'm able to be part of it, a part of making a difference there. I'm going to be there on the 22nd with bells on, and I'm so grateful that I've got a chance to come back to Edmonton to do it.
And we can't wait to have you. Before I let you go, though, we do something called 5 questions, 5 quick questions, one-word answers.
Yes.
If you were giving a dinner party, who would be your first guest?
What a hard question.
They're not easy, but they're just quick answers, though.
Very spontaneously. I guess a beloved member of my family.
All right. Lennon or McCartney?
Lennon.
Who's the one person you'd most want to meet who you haven't met yet? Arianna Huffington. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What book has had the most influence on you?
The I Ching, the Book of Changes.
And in one word, Margaret Trudeau.